The meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Democracy and General Purposes Committee meeting this evening on the 27th of January 2021. I'm the chair of that committee and I'm pleased to welcome you all. We're going to be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. This will include instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? Councillor Mackay, sometimes you like to.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
I know you like to reserve your right.
I reserve the right, if I may.
That's fine. That's just so that we know what's going on, not to stop you in any way. My role as chairman will continue, but the responsibility for actually managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic Services Officer, Lara Banks, Mrs. Banks. This officer will not steer the debate. She will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols, produce the minutes, and provide procedural advice as required. I'd like to remind members that the instant messaging will be visible to everybody viewing this meeting, and they can only be used by your good selves to indicate your wish to speak and preferably for no other purpose. I'll now ask the clerk to please take the attendance register, and I understand you're going to read out the list of committee members. Please confirm your attendance by answering present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Present.
Councillor Chapeltay.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Present.
Councillor Hasty.
Present.
Councillor Joy.
Present.
We've got apologies from Councillor Lewin, so instead we've got Councillor Cox as a substitute.
Present.
Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor Pearl.
Present.
And we've also got apologies from Councillor Webb. So we've got Councillor English as a substitute member.
Present.
Okay, thank you.
That's lovely, thank you. I will now ask you, Mrs. Banks, to read out the list of officers present and which items they'll be presenting.
Okay, thank you. So we've got Team Leader of Corporate Governance, Gina Clark, for item 14. Head of Mid-Kent Legal and Monitoring Officer, Patricia Narabor, for item 14. Head of HR Shared Services, Bal Sander, for items 15 and 16. The Head of Policy, Communications and Governance, Angela Woodhouse, for items 17 and 18. Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Ryan O'Connell, for item 19. And myself, Lara Banks, as the clerk.
Thank you very much. For item 1, we've already noted, haven't we, the apologies from Councillor Lewins and Councillor Webb. Substitute members, I think we've already been made aware that we've got Councillor English, haven't we, for Councillor Webb? And we've got Councillor Cox for Councillor Lewins. So I think that brings us on to item 3, urgent items. Now, there may be an urgent item arising from the question and answer session from members, so please bear that in mind, members. So can I move on to notification of visiting members?
Introduce the...
Yeah, you have Councillor Clements, and I might wish to speak on all items.
And Councillor Sams, I wish to ask a question.
Lovely, but so we've just got Councillor Clements as well.
And Councillor Mackay.
I beg your pardon, Councillor Mackay. I knew you were there, I just didn't write your name down.
How could you ignore me?
Oh, how could I just perish the thought? So after that, we're on to item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Members, are there any disclosures at all? I take your silence as there not being any. Thank you. Did I hear something?
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Gooch. I said no disclosures.
Oh, bless you. Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. Disclosures of lobbying. Can I have notification of lobbying, please? The clerk should ask. I beg your pardon.
Thank you. If you have been lobbied, if you can answer yes and the item that you've been lobbied for. Councillor Mrs. Blackmore.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. This is an odd one. I've actually been lobbied in respect of a question that I believe someone is going to ask at the committee tonight.
Okay,
I'm assuming I have to declare that.
that's great. I've noted that. Thank you.
Yeah, I will too.
Councillor Chapeltay. Sorry, was that none?
That was none.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Items 18 and 19.
Thank you. Councillor English.
None.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch. Sorry, Councillor Mrs. Gooch, have you been lobbied?
Yes, I'm on items 18 and 19.
Councillor Hasty.
I'm going to say 18 and 19. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joy.
None.
Councillor Perry.
Items 17, 18 and 19, and also, like Councillor Mrs Blackmore, I've been lobbied on the question.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Pearl.
Item 10, and items 17, 18 and 19.
Perfect, thank you. You're on mute, Chair.
I beg your pardon. I should also have advised you that I have been lobbied on question item 10 as well. I'm sorry, I left that off.
Thank you, I've noted that.
Thank you very much. I think that safely brings us to item 7, if I remember correctly, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I'm not aware that we have any Part 2 papers, so members, I intend to take all the items in public. Is that agreed? I take your silence as agreement. Thank you very much. Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2020. You'll find these on pages 1 to 4. I plan to move actually that the minutes of the meeting held on that date, the 11th of November, be agreed as a correct record. If there is no dissent, I'll assume that you're all agreed. Is that all right? And I'll sign them as a correct record at a later date. Silence reigns. Excellent. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, which is presentation of petitions. We have received no petitions. Item 10, question and answers from members of the public. I'm pleased to welcome Peter Cooling. Mr. Cooling, do please feel free to answer your question, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to ask it. Current practice with minutes of council meetings is that the answers to questions from the public and any supplementaries are recorded as quotes. The chairman responded, close quotes, citing the rationale as open quotes. This is a matter of practicality. The minutes will become pages and pages long. There will be queries of the exact wording used, and it is an intensive process to record every word of answers. This is fundamentally different from the minuting of discussions where matters are not quoted verbatim and represent a summary of debate, close quotes. Should the Constitution be amended to require minuting the gist of answers to public questions, rather than forcing members of the public to trawl through webcasts to find the answers, and especially when YouTube's archiving policy may not fulfill the requirement upon NBC to retain important materials for several years? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Cooling. And I have to say, I'm sure there are many of us that share your frustration, especially if it's a long planning meeting and we want to track who has said what on a particular item. But I have to say that as recently as September 2020, committee. The Council considered amendments to its constitution, including one which further clarified the current arrangements for minutes and recording answers. The sessions of question and answers and Council and committee decisions, they're two completely different things in governance terms, because the minutes of decisions capture the main content of the debate as it impacts on the discussion, and it provides precise resolutions. And of course, that's backed up by officers' reports. That in itself ensures the decisions can stand up, they can be challenged, and that correct authorisations are given. So it's a specific purpose of the minutes. However, question and answer sessions are different because the needs are different. You can't really ask a clerk to summarise an answer because they may not capture the essence of that answer correctly. They may not capture the intention of the answer, because it's down to the member to give the answer. They're not formulated specifically, well, they may be sometimes, but the member can give his own slant on answers. So the answers that are given don't necessarily represent the views of the committee or the council or even the clerk. It could be open to misinterpretation. So I'm afraid, Mr. Cooling, I'm not keen on your question, and I'm keen on your question, forgive me. I'm not going to suggest that we change our arrangements for the reasons that I've outlined. Is there a supplementary to your question?
Yes, and I'm not keen on your answer, put it that way. But
did think you would be.
There needs to be a little background here. There is a main question to which the member tends to have written script to give an answer from the officers, and then I would agree the supplementary answer is off the cuff. So there can be no reason, I believe, and it would be very easy to copy across from Word. There's no reason why the main answer cannot be included in the minutes. And I even believe your support staff, and I'm sure Lara is a good example of that, are entirely capable of capturing the gist of the supplementary in its answer. So I'm sorry, I think the main answer, there's no excuse other than to put it in the minutes. And I think it's almost being, insulting is too strong a word, but I'll use it, insulting to support staff to say they cannot capture the gist of a supplementary and the supplementary's answer, Chair. Sorry to be disrespectful if that's disrespectful.
I didn't take it that way, Mr. Cooling. And in fact, I think it's more of protecting our very capable of staff. The way that members of the public interpret the answers that are given may not be, can be captured certainly, but they would also be challenged, easily challenged. And I will also add that on the main response, yes, we're provided with official responses, but I know from my own experience, I haven't always followed that verbatim. And I haven't always, in fact, I'm sure I can think of other examples where other chairmen have not necessarily followed the exact response. I'm afraid, Mr. Cooling, you're pushing at a closed door because I do not remain convinced by this. I'm not convinced by the question that you have posed. I am more, I stick by the answers I have given. I'm afraid. Thank you, Mr. Cooling. And on that note, which I appreciate you do not appreciate, but however, I respectfully suggest that from that, we move on to the next item, which is the question and answers from, or questions from members to the chairman. And I understand that we have one question from Councillor Mrs. Sams.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you very much. This is the question. Given the current situation re the pandemic and concern within the council, a need to ensure we keep everyone safe, and the latest Local Government Information Unit Daily News reporting nationally that there is a request to move elections to the autumn, Do you think that it would be helpful to communicate a similar response to national government through our 2 elected MPs? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your question, Councillor Mrs. Sands. It's extremely appropriate that you should ask it. I have an answer, actually, because our returning officer has been heavily involved in this issue with a team of other returning officers across Kent. The Local Government Information Unit recently conducted a survey of leaders and returning officers concerning the conduct of elections, for which the polling day, as you know, is scheduled for the 6th of May this year. The results have already been reported in the press, I know, and there are twin concerns about continuing to protect public health during the pandemic and at the same time achieving democratic principles in those circumstances. And it's a very tricky dilemma. There appeared to be widespread support for delaying the elections until the autumn of 2021. That's quite a time scale, and I'm not insinuating that they are delayed until that time. It's not in our gift. But I can advise you that the Chief Executive provided advice to our MPs in consideration of the topic. She did so in her role of returning officer, which of course is a separate statutory role. Because she has responsibility not to us as a local authority, but as returning officer, she's responsible to the courts, to the judiciary. But I think it's important that both your good self and in fact all members around this committee and anybody viewing to know that the key points that were made in her response. As far as Maidstone is concerned, the elections team will be managing 5 different elections with 3 different voting systems on the 6th of May. And they will manage this scale and complexity of elections, whichever polling day we have. So that will happen anyway. They're currently planning for COVID-19 delivery for every stage in the election process. That's from receiving nomination papers right through the count, establishing whether or not there are suitable venues, whether they are safe and secure, whether every person participating in the polling needs to wear protective equipment all the time, some of the time, and putting in arrangements for public health protection. We've got to have social distance, both with the public in the polling stations and at the count with candidates and the agents. And of course, that would affect the size of the venues that we would have to use. So all the venues that we would normally take up may not now be suitable. So we're certainly good, this borough is certainly good at planning, and we're confident that we can achieve the necessary arrangements to keep people safe, but it will be challenging, it'll be expensive, and it will carry increased risk. Now, we've already let the electorate know about encouraging postal voting and to reassure people that voting in person will be safe. And of course, we've got the rollout of the vaccine, but the race between getting everybody vaccinated and getting the venues secure, that balance may change by the time polling day comes in May. There's no guarantee on the timing of the vaccination, so there is a risk there. Not to mention, of course, we've got the canvassing and all the other preparations that we as members carry out in the preparation. Door-to-door canvassing, of course, wouldn't be permitted under the current regulations. As far as returning officers are concerned, across the county, there is serious consideration about giving that we should reschedule the elections so that we will have more time for preparation, but most importantly, that the polls take place where people are confident that they can go out to vote safely. and that really is the crux of the matter. We've been advised that Public Health England have been asked to conduct a public health assessment with respect to the May elections, and we're not sure about what the outcome of that is. So when we have that full picture for agents, supporters, our staff, people responsible for premises and the whole bit, then making sure that everybody's got an equal opportunity to vote, then perhaps when that time comes, we may have a better idea as to the best approach. But even then, that doesn't mean that everybody will feel confident to either vote by proxy, especially with the different elections that are going on. It could be confusing for some people. So really, the returning officers have concluded that to spend this significant amount of time and energy at the moment for risk assessing and finding alternatives, it's very difficult at the moment to make it secure. You've got to find the staff to actually do it. And of course, a lot of them are experienced, who tend to be older people who have the higher risks. I'm also aware, of course, the reason that the situation is so tricky is that nationwide, we're short of councillors where we have not had by-elections. So there are gaps. So there's this huge balance between the risk. And I will end by saying we as a borough have a duty of care to our staff, not to put them in a risky situation. Now, I'm sorry to have gone on for so long, but I have to say that I propose actually members to raise this as an urgent item later on in the agenda, so that after this question and answer session, so that you can perhaps add your own views and consider it, and maybe approach the Chief Executive about it if the committee are so minded. Councillor Sands, how do you feel about that? Are you satisfied with that question? I hope you are. Sorry, answer, because I hope you are, because it's pretty comprehensive.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it was very, very full, very comprehensive, and I thank you for that answer. And I won't be asking a supplementary, but I hope, obviously, it's something that you can discuss further in the committee with all the other members. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Samson. On this very subject, I have Councillor English. Oh, sorry, you want me to ignore your request to speak? I've got Councillor Mrs. Blackmore and Councillor Mackay. Councillor English, you did have your urgent item question.
No, Madam Chairman, that was a mistake, but I do want to speak on the urgent item when it's actually an item.
Thank you. I will bear that in mind. Councillor Blackmore, was it on the member's question?
It was actually on the member of the public's question, yes, but it was a while ago.
I'm still happy to take it, Councillor Blackmore.
Well, it's more of a statement rather than the question, and it was actually to help Mr. Cooling.
Please do.
Because there is always the opportunity to have a written answer. Anyone who asks a question can have a written answer, and they will receive that within a specified period of time. And I wondered if that would actually help Mr. Cooling at all, if he could have the written answer.
I'm not sure if that would apply to planning so much. Did you want to comment, Councillor English?
Well, there are no questions to the chairman of planning committee at planning committee, so the question does not apply because there are no questions at planning committee.
Thank you for putting me right.
But I wasn't referring to planning. I was actually thinking about the other committees when a lot of people come to speak. I think planning should be treated in a completely different way. But personally, I think Mr. Cooling and others have attended full council, they've attended policy and resources, etc. And I think the opportunity to be given a written answer surely will help. That's my suggestion.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Blackmore. I think that's pretty helpful. I'm sure that Mr. Cooling will take that into account. It's certainly more helpful than my response to him, I have to say. Thank you for that. I think at this point, members, I would like to take in the urgent item that the committee takes the comments from the returning officer that I read out, and you may want to have some additional views. I will have a recommendation to put to the committee. I suppose we're on an 11A kind of, would that be about right? I'm trying to help you with the procedure here, Mrs. Banks. Would you call it 11A, urgent item, or something like that? If we can.
Yeah, we can. In the minutes, I believe it will be listed without the item number.
Lovely. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Members, with your permission, I would like to therefore take this urgent item and I will have a recommendation from the chair to make that the Chief Exec be given the support of this committee to lobby appropriate bodies on behalf of the Council, including MPs and the government, for the elections to be delayed. Before we have debate and discussion, may I have a seconder for my recommendation, please?
Happy to second.
Happy to second.
Ooh. Councillor Cox, I take your name first. Thank you very much. I did have Councillor English first, then Councillor Blackmore.
I think Councillor Mackay was actually before me, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Mackay, as a visiting member, I beg your pardon. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And by the way, I thought your answer to Councillor Sands was very full and very detailed.
Thank you.
But my ears failed me at one point. You referred to the fact, I believe, that Maidstone Borough Council have promoted or let residents know. I'm not quite sure what you were saying regarding the option of postal voting. Sorry, yes. What have Maidstone Borough Council done? I'm not aware they've done anything.
Yeah, there was our communications team sent out. It was a news release. It was a media release because, funnily enough, I quoted it in my local newsletter. That's how I know it was carried out. Back in, I think it was October. I'm not sure, but a news release did go out, and
yeah, okay, fine, okay. I was hoping for something a bit more substantial than that. Might it not be an idea? Maybe this is not the. We're about to send out letters to all residents for council tax that enclosing with that an application to vote by post. That would cost us no additional cost in terms of postage and the cost of a piece of paper. I mean, I think that's going to be the safest way for people to vote. But anyway, that would be a suggestion.
Thank you. I will ask the team to look into it, but I'm just thinking that our machine automatically generates a bit of paper that goes into an envelope and it gets coughed out at the other end. Yes, Ryan.
Would it help if I provide some information to the committee
yes,
on what
please.
we have done?
Yes, please.
So we have, at this time of year, in this year, we've had to do a postal vote refresh, which is where we have to contact people who have postal votes and ask them the information. We've been through our postal vote list. We've also are actually currently in the process of printing a household notification letter, which is a letter that we're using because we went through the first reformed canvass. But as part of that, we've provided an FAQ that points out the options for postal voting too. So that's where we're writing to every household in the borough. We are also putting a leaflet in with the council tax letters that are going out. So the suggestion that Councillor Mackay has made is something that we are doing.
Good.
And in addition, we will be writing to the clinically extremely vulnerable in the borough and pushing postal votes a bit more heavily with them as an option. So we have those three main ways of going out directly to the public. We will also have a communications campaign that runs from now until the elections, making people aware of options, and that will piggyback onto the back of the national electoral commission campaign that's going on around postal voting as well. So it is something that we are very much pushing on, but we do have to bear in mind that we can't make people have postal votes. We can't, force things into people's hands and suggest it too heavily in some cases. And the other thing is that whilst we aren't sending people a postal vote form, there is the development nationally that they're trying to develop in very short order. So it needs to be tested and make sure it works, but an electronic postal vote registration form to sit alongside the national registration form that already exists. So there is a push nationally as well as the work that we're doing locally.
Delighted to hear all that, Ryan. I'm delighted that you're way ahead of me.
And me too, actually, Councillor Mackay. That's very encouraging. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. I know that we have Councillor Kimmants as a visiting member. Did you want to say anything, Councillor Kimmants, before I move on to Councillor Mrs. Blackmore and Councillor Mr. Cox?
No, thank you. No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor English?
Thank you. I was aware of some of what Ryan and his team have been doing, but not all of it. It's good to see how much work's being done. However, whilst going to a largely postal vote, or even possibly an entirely postal vote election, is definitely safer, what we are in a situation is that we are not going to be able to have candidates or campaigns or councillors put any sort of case to the electorate, whether it's in Maidstone or anywhere else. So if an election is barely smuggled across the finishing line for May, it will not be much of an election. People will not have much in the way of a choice put before them. It is the only democratic option is to look for an election taking place in the autumn of this year, because it would be equally difficult to try and postpone 5 sets of elections and have them with the regular elections next year. So I really do think that in the interest of democracy and accountability, as well as public safety, we should be pushing hard through the Chief Executive and